Okay, welcome back everybody. My name is T Cypher and welcome to the next video looking at my construction of the QueenBee, an upgrade from the WorkBee CNC router machine. Last video I left it in a situation where I wasn't quite sure where I was going to go. I was talked about expanding the X-axis C-beams and I said I'll come back to you once I'd moved forward and completed most of the mechanical build. So where I'm at now is I made this decision. I expanded my C-beam to 110 millimeters. So and I therefore had to expand the front and back axis by to 105 centimeters. So yeah, that's 110 centimeters across there. And what's this given me? It gives me plenty of clearance so that I don't run out of rail early, but it still maximises my amount of travel. I've reconstructed it. I've not put in the X and Y Acme screw threads yet because, to put it simply, this allows me to move it around manually and get a feel of how everything's working so as to mock out and work out the majority of the information you can see. So what this build has actually given me is it gives me a X traverse of 860 millimeters and a Y traverse I believe will come out about 555 millimeters. Like I say, until I get it actually fully assembled I can't finalize those numbers. Those are just roughing based on tape measurements. So as we can see, we have a good amount of movement in the X, and Y is moving quite freely as well. So yeah, things I did. I've taken off about a millimeter off the back of this top plate here, and now I've got a good clearance between the aluminium plate and the motor mount plate. So that we're good there. That's that problem solved. I also decided to start sticking in some of these in. So I talked about previously about how I didn't have a surface plate. I also mentioned now that I'm actually was going back into work. I'm now back into work, which I'm enjoying, but it's also given me access to a surface plate, which I use to reset this axis up here. And lo and behold, this thing ain't flat on the side. So yeah, and I can also say these are almost certainly slightly bowed. But what I've done is I've got them and I've trued them up against the surface plate. So I picked two mounting points, two fixed points, and then I clamped between basically the beam, the C-beam, onto the surface plate at those 2 points, and then I squared up the linear rail against the surface plate. So the linear rail should be flat as a die. Yeah, there is 0.1, 0.2 movement going on here and there. It's not 0.1, 0.2, 0.01, 0.02 movement maximum going on in deflection across the length, but it's very hard to dial it in exactly because as soon as you even just creak the screws a little bit, it moves. So yeah, those are now dialed in flat. I still need to dial in these axes properly, and I'll have to back off this and get any twist out of it as well. But like I say, I'm presently going through a just a dry build just to work things out. I've mounted on the drag chain on the X. I've basically used some wooden blocks and a clamp just at the moment, just to, like I say, rough out the sizing there, just to see if it works. And I'm going to have running through this drag chain. I'm going to have the heavy gauge power cable for this spindle. I'll have a air line. I'll have a water line for mister potentially. I will have the Z-axis motor. I'll have the Z-axis limit switch, and I'll have the depth probe connection bits which go into here. So I'm going to have quite a lot going through that chain. Hopefully it'll all fit in, but I have come to realise that even though this chain is presently going across the entire length, the reality is I only actually need it up to about there, and then I could go freehand after that because there's no more rotation going on beyond that point. So what I might well end up doing, if it's proving problematic, I might well actually have a second drag chain running parallel to this, which might be carrying half the cables just to try and declutter that, but that's a future Ross problem. Y-axis is moving freely, as you can see, and with the drag chain here, what I've done is actually, I thought, on the same principle there, the drag chain on the original workbee goes all the way to the back, which that's fine because it's taking the cables from the stepper motors that are driving the Y-axis and bringing them all the way into the control box, which sits around out here on the workbee. Now I'm taking that the Duet controller off machine because, to put it simply, I did notice a lot of dust and debris does get chucked up and was landing on the board, which I wasn't that happy with. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking it off the machine, and I've got a little electronics cabinet which I'm going to bolt to the back side of it under here. So what I've done is actually I've stopped the drag chain here, which allows me, basically, it means I don't have to have as longer cables running for starters, which I can only see as a positive. And it allows me to dive straight into the control box. And yeah, I actually bought extra drag train, but in hindsight, bearing in mind I did upgrade from a 750 to a 1750, so I bought extra drag chain, but actually I probably didn't need it in hindsight. Yeah, so I'll just pause it for a second. I'll go off hands-free, and I'll just show you a few little things I've decided to do and little thoughts I've had to try and solve some of my problems. Okay, so hands-free time, and again I apologise as per normal for the shakiness of this. So what I've actually done, and I apologise, we'll get some shadows coming in, is I've put in place a couple of little blocks, and I'll see if I can get some focus going on. Well, you can see it now. Basically, this is just to stop the block running off the rails. Yeah, paranoia is a must when you're playing with these blocks. The amount of times I've had balls pop out is annoying, to say the least. In all honesty, I'd recommend that you put the blocks onto the rails before you put the blocks onto the mounting plates, so that minimises the chance of ball bearings coming off. Now, as for limit switches, last time I discussed about how I was going to mount my limit switches. Now, one benefit of going out to this 110 is giving me 5 centimeters either side, which actually works out perfectly for putting the supplied block in place here. I would say I have come across a slight minor problem, like all these things. There's so many little things and variances going on between the different kits. I'm sure this is one of them. The limit switches I've got are mounted by M3 by 8mm screws. This block is probably best part of 8mm thick, and the holes are actually designed for the screws to go into. So this is probably a variance between limit switches CNC 3D are using and what Uzas are using. But that's not the end of the world. I can get longer M3 plastic screws. I can drill out that hole there, so that's not really a problem. But that solves my issue with the where to place the limit switch on the X-axis. And as I can bring this in, you'll see that it lines up pretty nicely, and I have dry mounted the switch on there so that the limit switch will tag off here quite nicely. So that's that problem solved, and then I can run the cable. I'll probably just simply loop it around the back and run it along the back rail and get it out of the way that way. So that's the limit switch on that one sorted. Now if I come across the Y-axis, what I've used what I suspect was meant to be for the Z-axis. And that actually places the limit switch quite nicely, again, to tag off this beam here. Again, if I place the limit switch there, that should be good. And then I can just run the limit switch down the back rail. I seem to remember the limit switch was on the other side of the Y-axis as last time, but this won't make any real difference in all honesty. There are builds out there which use 2 limit switches on the Y, which in theory should help it allow it to self-square. I'd love to do that, but that's probably a future project for me rather than something in the immediate future. I will also state that most of these blocks here are actually loose at the moment and just basically tightened up then turned back a quarter turn, just because I need to square up the beam anyway, and I'm doing a dry fit. What I might do is if I pull it back here, you can see it, so that's all the way back. You can see there's a little gap going on still there. there's like a little tang on the bottom of this, which is what's going into the rail. What I might well do is I might trim that back a bit so I can move the limit switch even further aft, just to maximize my gantry movement there. Yep. And what else? We come across, you can see a bit of drag chain I was messing around with. You can actually see the reason for this tyre upgrade in the first place. This is the drag chain mount, which normally goes around about there for the work B, but it snapped because, yeah. And that was actually when I started to look at upgrading just to a simple 1000 by 750 work B, not thinking about doing the linear rails at that time. But as the bits started to arrive, I changed my mind and decided to go to linear rails at the same time. Drag chain mounts, no problem there. If I zoom in here, you can see just a block there. I'm still not 100% how I'm going to solve this problem. The actual Ooze Nest work B has a different hole pattern here that has holes specifically for the mounting of this, which isn't on this, which it means I'm not quite sure. I don't know if I'm going to have to make a new 3D part, or maybe work something up with Word or what, just to interlink, connect this block to this block. But beyond that, the drag chain seems to be behaving fine, so I've got no concern there. Now if I come across here, okay, that's just mounting exactly the same as on the work B, just different location. Yeah. Now if I come to this one, last time I discussed, I was struggling to work out how to mount the drag chain on the y-axis. I later realised that there's a spacing of holes. Basically, I think you can put a full 80 by 20 across here, so that would be the entire width of that. That'd really strengthen that up. And there's actually a hole pattern for that behind here. If I quickly come back to the other side, we can see the hole pattern is there. I do apologise, the focus isn't probably picking it up properly. Now, what I've realised is actually the centre distance of the holes for this one were the same. So what I've been able to do, and it's actually fitted quite nicely across there. So that's actually solved that problem for me. I must admit, I can't even remember. I don't think the original one had this orientation. I might well have done, and I might just be misremembering stuff. But yeah, it's coming nicely. I'll be able to bring the wires around here, loop it into the drag chain, and as I said, I've shortened the drag chain to there. And if I do full axis movement, you can see it's coming up. I might put one more link into there just to move it out, but I feel happy about how that drag chain's moving now, and I'm pretty happy about that layout. So yeah, yeah, and I think that will bring this particular video to a pause. Hopefully in the next video you will see some more progress. Please like and subscribe if you want to continue to follow my build, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, so what I've done with the Z-axis is I've created a little 3D part with my resin Illigomars printer. It's the first time I got it out mothball for probably the last 6 months. So yeah, so the idea of the part is, as you can see, I've taken the switch, I put a bit of heat shrink on the end here just purely to make up some space. See if I can get it into focus. Come on, focus, you silly thing. Okay, so hopefully you can see I've added a little bit of heat shrink on the end here, just because my measurements were slightly out, and I've just been working it. So basically the wires, they come in from one side, tuck underneath, then go through a channel to a socket. Now the way this is going to fit, if I bring it in here, you can see it, it fits on like this. Okay, and that brings the wires, so they'll come along to the outside in between the blocks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reassemble it. As you can see, I've taken the the Acme screw out. So I'm going to just reassemble it and then just show you the final working piece. And just before I do that, what I've actually done is I've inserted these into the 3D part, so it's actually metal spacers all the way. I could have done the spacing with the 3D material, but I just still not 100% sure I trust the dimensions on 3D parts. Okay, so I've bolted this down, and now you can see how that sub-assembly retains this part in place, and you can see how it stands. The actual micro switch stands held at this bottom plate here. And again, I apologise for the focusing issues. Okay, so as that's now in place, what I'm going to do is actually just back this off a little bit, just to leave some play in the anti-backlash nut, and I'm going to assemble it into the Z axis now. Okay, so I've now got it all back assembled. You can just about see probably the limit switch down there. Okay, and then on the right side of the piece you have the connection point coming out there. I've decided to do this way just so that if I'm disassembling, reassembling it at any point in time, I can easily unplug and replug it back in instead of having probably 2-3 meters of wire running through. And just as an aside, we can actually just see here where I've taken off the top millimeter of this part here, just to ensure the clash doesn't happen there. And as a final thing, I'm actually using M3 by 10s here now with a couple of washers behind, cap heads. Fortunately, I don't have spring washers for the M3s. I do use spring washers I've had, mainly because you can get a larger Allen key into these heads. And I just feel like you've got a better grip when you're actually tightening it. When I was playing with the small button head ones, I do find that it feels like you could round them off far too easily. So that's this part done, and now I've got to true this bit up again for the fourth time now, and tighten everything up. But yeah, and in a second I will show you what I've done with the limit switches on the rest of the machine since the last little bit of footage I filmed. Okay, it's a few days later, to say the least. I've done a lot of progress on the mechanical side of things. I've started to run the electrics in place. You can see now I've put into place the Acme threads. What I decided to do, and I've converted this, even though this is a WorkBee 1, I've tried to convert it to the WorkBee 2, where I have it on tension here. Hopefully this will work. If not, I'll have to find a tool to actually tension it up a bit better. Limit switches, I've actually gone around redesigning and remaking the limit switches on my resin printer. As you can see, here's the Z axis in place now, all the way up. Yep, like I say, slowly getting everything together and start to run stuff through the trunking. Trunking's very tight. Ideally I'd like to have this an inch further up, but I've basically knocked together a simple little aluminium bracket there to mount it onto with some spacers. Not ideal, but maybe in future I might look at raising this up to maybe about this sort of height here. Yeah. Also, the problem I came across was even though I've trimmed this bit back here, this part here was then interfering. So this is the Z-axis mount point for the the mount point for the touch probe. So I've sanded it back, and I've just about got clearance now. I've also going to not run the cable through the little gap here, mainly because it's going to be right up against the X plate. So I'm going to run it up there. I've cut a little bit of recess in the back of the fixture, and I'm going to cable tie it to here to make sure it stays clear of the spindle. Coming across, you can see the actual wires inside here. It's quite heavily packed, in all honesty. So I've got in here, this is the XYZ probe, servo motor. This is liquid for a mister, air for a mister. This cable here is going to be the limit switch, and this cable here is the spindle itself. Okay, so I've got it coming down here, and if we come here, you can see another one of the limit switches I've remodeled. I just wanted to pull it back. The default one wasn't quite working out for me, So yeah, that's where I'm got to now. I'm going to continue the build. My hope is before the end of the weekend to have at least a level of functionality going. I probably won't have the base assembled, the spoiler board assembled by then, but I've got a couple of days I can dedicate to try and getting this back online, and hopefully we can get it. We'll see a moving part in the not too distant future. It's alive! Okay, jokes aside, I finally got the actual electronics up and running now. Still need to finish off routing, put some studs in place. Just as a clue on where we've moved to from the previous build of the 750 by 750 model I had before, with these upgrades, it puts me at a previously I had X movement of 560. I now have a X movement of 848, so that's a nice big jump there. Surprisingly, Y-axis, I've seen a movement. Previously I had Y of 541. Sorry, correction, 527. I'm now getting 541, so I gained over a centimetre movement there. I can probably increase that to 542 in all honesty. I think I've got another millimetre to play with there. And my Z movement has gone from 94 to 147. I think you probably saw it when I hit the home command there. There was a I've got to just update. You've got to update all your home commands to take into account the larger area, and with the specifically with the Z axis, you need to make sure you go in and adjust your rapid movement. So if I look at the command here, it's G1H1 Z94 at the moment, so that needs to be moved to, I'm putting it to 200, and this will guarantee that I'll hit the end stop if I'm all the way at the bottom. Just do a quick emergency stop reset on that. I'm just updating all on my phone because you can. It's one of the big benefits of the Duet Wi-Fi I like, or the Duet full stop, is the ability to access it through your phone. So if I just go back to machine controls dashboard and rehome it all, and if I go down to the bottom of the Z now, hopefully this time when I hit the home command it should go all the way to the top. So let's check that. Home X, Y, Z. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's up and running. I'll just go freehand in a second just to show you where we stood on everything else. Okay, time to suffer hands free again. So things I've done since the last updates I did. You can see I've now got the cable, run it all through, put a hole in there, dropped it through there. I must admit I missed this wire, I've got to feed that one back in. I've had to patch wires together because the length's involved, but that's not a biggie. These Y-axes I'm running down here. Yep. What else? What else have I done? Apart from getting it running, that's pretty much it, really. I don't know if I mentioned last time, this is where the water is going to come in here, and I'm going to have that strap that to the back of the beam, I think, and that should work nicely. So yeah, and I think that's it really. This build's been a bit complicated at times. come across many little faults and problems along the way, but the problems are there to be solved, and I've solved them most of the way. And that's it for the QueenBee upgrade build. The next thing I'm going to be going on to is continuing with my electronics side of things. So I don't know if I'm going to do a video on this, but you can see the little duet there, and down there my VFD controller. My next thing is actually putting in some electronics so that the duet can control the VFD and give us my spindle speeds. And yeah, I've got to build the rebuild the spoiler board, but the spoiler board has sort of been built for a while actually. It was one of the first things I did, and it's underneath this pile of rubbish here. I don't. If we go underneath, you can probably see the grid I'm using, and that should pretty much drop into place and bolt it all up. I've got some extra long lengths here from where I was going to do just a meter span before I increase the width, so I use those just to strengthen it all up, get it all calibrated, and yeah, that's it. So thank you for joining me for this video. It's been created over the course of a couple of weeks actually. Thanks again to CNC 3D for all their support, and like I've said before, they're very good at the communications of things, so please feel free to reach out to them and talk to them, and any questions please leave them in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and hope you join me for future videos. Bye for now.